Broadcasting from the United States Institute of Peace in Washington, D.C., welcome to the Peace Frequency, a podcast series searching for ways to create a world free of violent conflict and finding them in the stories of people across the globe that are making peace possible. I'm your host, Darren Cambridge. In December 2015, the United Nations Security Council passed Resolution 2250, which urges member states to increase representation of youth in decision-making at all levels. The world has also experienced a rise in the attention given to the role, power, and importance of women and girls in advancing peace and justice. In 2000, the UN Security Council passed Resolution 1325, urging all actors to increase the participation of women and incorporate gender perspectives in all United Nations peace and security efforts. These resolutions have been transformative in how governments, NGOs, and civil society groups engage in peace-building efforts. And that transformation is only possible through the consistent, brave, and determined work of folks like my guest on today's show. Joining me in the studio today is Saba Ismail. She is the co-founder and executive director of Aware Girls. She co-founded this organization with her sister, Gulali.
Yes.
Gulali, and it is a young women-led organization working for women empowerment, gender equality, and peace in Pakistan. Saba serves as the executive director, as I said, and with her colleagues, she strengthens the leadership capacity of young women, enabling them to act as agents of social change and women empowerment in their communities. In 2013, Foreign Policy magazine named Saba as one of their 100 leading global thinkers. She is also on the Steering Committee of the United Network of Young Peacebuilders. She represents Asia in the World Youth Movement for Democracy, and she is the co-founder of the South Asian Regional Feminists Forum on Women's Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. So Saba, thank you for joining me. It's an honor to be sitting down with you today.
Thank you so much, Darren, for inviting me to this podcast.
So you've been in DC for a few days now, correct? Can you bring us up to speed on what kind of experiences you've had during your time here in DC so far?
Sure. So I was actually at the World Bank Youth Forum. It was a forum in which the young people were invited. There were all discussions about young people focusing on young people in development, youth in development. So it was a nice opportunity to meet and interact with other young people from around, all around the world. There have been discussions on health, on youth and education in the 21st century, youth and climate change, and youth, peace, and security as well. It was also one of the discussion topics. So yeah, it was really interesting to be here, to be in DC and have these amazing discussions.
And you were at USIP too, right?
Yes, I was at the USIP, exactly. So it was actually launch of the Security Council Resolution 2250 on youth, peace, and security, as you mentioned in the intro. This is actually a resolution that was passed in December 2015, and for the first time in the history, UN recognized that young people are the peace builders, and they are not only the troublemakers. So it gave us a lot of recognition that yes, young men and young women can contribute a lot to the peace building processes. So it was, of course, it was an achievement, and we, all of the actors that were engaged in this process, we wanted to celebrate this, and that's why we wanted to have launch in DC. So I was actually sharing about my experiences in the DC launch of the Resolution 2250.
That's great. You said that young people are recognized as peace builders and not just troublemakers, but sometimes peace builders are troublemakers. Is that not correct?
Well, we can say that they are, because they are, yes, they are putting the bad people in trouble. So they are putting the people who don't want peace, who are the religious extremist groups, who are maybe the government that are supporting the extremist ideologies. So of course we are the peace builders, are the troublemakers for the ones who don't want peace on this earth.
Right on. Well, we start all these podcasts with a segment I like to call Behind the Bio. So people can go online, they can Google your name, they can learn about Aware Girls and learn a lot about your bio, a lot of which I shared in the intro here. I encourage folks to check you out on Twitter. That's at Saba Ismail. That's SABAISMAIL. You can also check out Aware Girls on Twitter, which is at Aware Girl. and go to their website at awaregirls.org. So you can learn a lot about Saba and in all those places. But the Behind the Bio segment, I'm going to ask you a question that hopefully gives us a window behind your bio and into some of your personality, your motivations, your principles, etc. So the question that I have for you today is, let's say university, college or university calls you up and says, Saba, we want you to teach a class on your philosophy of life. And you agree and you put together the syllabus and you have one book that is going to be required reading that all students must acquire in order to take this class. What would that one book be and why?
Yeah, well, I think it's a very difficult question to answer because honestly, I like one thing is I like a lot of books. And I think that, one book cannot give, answer or cannot teach philosophy of life. I think that people learn the philosophy of life by experiencing and witnessing a lot of things in their life. So lives are like, one life is also like, it can be many books. One person's life can be many books if like if there are interesting things in that. But yes, there is a book. Its name is Not Without My Daughter. And this is a very inspiring book for me because this is a story about a woman who was actually a US citizen. She got married with a guy who was from a Middle Eastern country. I don't remember exactly, but I think it was from Iran. And how she went to then with husband to Iran, and she was the cultural norms, values, the violence that was actually happened to her from her in-laws, from her husband, and how she escaped, how she went back to life. It's really an inspiring story. It tells about the struggles that she went through, but the point that I learned from it was she never gave up. It was like never a moment in her life that she was like, okay, now I'm trapped in this situation and this is it. So they were like, she was struggling. She struggled for so many years, and she made it at the end. And I think, yeah, that, and she got a lot of opportunities to escape that, but she was having a daughter. She didn't want it to suffer her the same things that she suffered, and she got the opportunity to escape, but there were like places in which she has to leave her daughter, and she didn't want it to do that. So yeah, I think that's one story that gives a lot of that. I think everyone can learn a lot of things from that book.
Great. And the title of it again is
Not Without My Daughter.
Not Without My Daughter. Thanks for sharing that. Let's jump now into the work that you've been doing with Where Girls. I also want to tell all of our listeners that you can chime into this conversation. You can pose any questions you have for Saba on the Facebook post. You can post any questions you have on the live broadcast page. If you're listening right now, you can just go to the forum space below and type your question in there. Or you can tweet us your questions using the hashtag Peace Frequency. Again, that's hashtag Peace Frequency. So Saba, take us to the early moments in founding Aware Girls. How old were you? How old was your sister? And what sparked the motivation to start this organization?
Okay, so I was 15 years old and my sister was 16-year old when we started the organization Aware Girls. The motivation behind that was that when we were actually both when we were growing up, so we had a cousin. She was almost of our age and she wanted to become a pilot. So one day when she woke up, her parents told her that she cannot go to school anymore because she had to got married to a man who was almost 15 years older than her. Her dreams were shattered. She couldn't do anything, and I and my sister were shocked. We wanted to do something, but we couldn't do at that moment. And she ended up leaving her school, and she had to marry this person. She became wife of this person who was 15 years older than her. So that was the moment, was like, what should we do? What can we do to prevent such things in the future as well? So that was actually the moment that I and my sister, we discussed this idea, because at that time there was no platform for young women and girls in Pakistan where they can go, where they can speak up for themselves. So there was no single platform, and we were like, what is someone is in that situation, and how we can prevent that. There is no way for us. What should we do? And then we discussed the idea of Aware Girls with our friends in school, and then we were like, okay, we really want this platform because this is really needed. And the motivation was that we don't want any other girl to be taken out of school just because she had to get married, or we don't want any other girl to face domestic violence. We don't want any other girl to suffer like her. And it's not the story of one girl, because in our work we realize that it's not the story of one girl, but it's the story of many millions of girls around the world. So it was actually that was the motivation behind setting up Aware Girls. But then we started actually working with young women and girls. So we actually where I was actually getting education from a school, from public school, and I was taught in my school that I was taught actually hatred towards people who are having different beliefs. I was taught that going to Kashmir or Afghanistan and fighting for jihad is a matter of justice. And I was because I grew up in an area where wall chalking for jihadi recruitment was a very common sight, and people who were martyrs, who were killed in those troops, their martyrship was celebrated. So I was while growing up in that environment, I thought that it is the fight for justice. So that's why I and my siblings, we were like all the time, we wish that we could go to Kashmir or Afghanistan and we just can do something to for our country and for like but and it was all taught to us in our common school. So it's not like, I'm not talking about religious school, it was a common school. So but I'm so thankful to our father, who is a human rights activist and who guided us in all these processes, that what's right, what's wrong, how we can use our potential, what if we want to do something good, so how we can do that. So while we at from the platform of Aware Girls, when we were working, so I actually come across a mother whose 13 years old son was taken away by the militant groups. And this 13-year-old son didn't inform their family that he is going, because he was brainwashed the way that it's not necessary that you inform your parents or your family. It's because you are doing something for justice, and you are actually doing something to protect your country and to protect your religion, and you will get the reward, your parents will get reward after life. So he was so much brainwashed that he left. And after a few months, this mother received the dead body of his son. So when she actually told me, and my sister, so that was actually also the moment for us to realize that what's wrong with the killing of people, what's wrong in this, in this, that it's not actually the fight for justice, but it's because some groups or some people are using other people to promote their own agenda. They're working on religious extremism, and it's not that what we want to do it. So that's how I and my sister started working on preventing and countering violent extremism. And we thought that it's really very important that we prevent young people, because the same thing that we didn't wanted other families to be suffered like that, we didn't wanted mothers to be suffered like that, or neither we don't want people to be misused by the extremist groups. So because we believe that young people do have the potential to bring change, and if they do have, like, if somebody is committed, you can do it something very non-violently in a very peaceful way.
You mentioned your cousin who wanted to be a pilot and was unable to. She was 13 at the time. Is that
Yes,
correct? What is she doing now?
she's now housewife of 4 kids,
Okay. Okay.
taking care of the family and household.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
good. All right. All right. And you also mentioned that you were going to a traditional common school. This, like you said, it wasn't necessarily a religious school. It was just a common school, but they were still teaching this idea of it's honorable to go and fight in these battles. Yet your father, you said, was a human rights activist, advocate, and so I'm interested to hear how you, at this age, 14, 15 years old, how you were receiving messages at school from teachers, and then maybe a different message at home from your dad and how you competing messages?
Yeah, I think, yeah, you have asked a very difficult question, I think, because it was, of course, a personal battle. Because in like everywhere, if what is in school, if it was like peers, teachers, they were all teaching the same thing, There was like, that people that they were like teaching us that you shouldn't eat with non-Muslims, you shouldn't use the same utensils at all. Shaking hand with non-Muslims is, it's like you become dirty when you do all these things. And on the other hand, our father was teaching something extremely opposite, that, he was always taught about pluralism, about diversity, about accepting, all these things. So, and he's a very liberal person. So this was this was like, even at a very personal level, it was a battle that who is right and who is wrong. Like, should I listen to the, because my father is just one person, telling me. But I love my father, I love my dad, and of course he is an inspiration for me. But at that age, I was like, I'm not sure, is my father right, or is all these people? Because my father is like a very different person from the rest of the society. It's not normal to have, like, such liberal people, who believe that, that if you have to, for example, what he would say to us, that because in our schools we were like, teaching Quran, so we had to, like, we have to read it in Arabic. So when we were like, practicing it in our home, so our father would ask, why are you reading a language that you are not able to understand? Read it. I'm not telling you not to read something, but I'm like, I want to tell you that if you want to read it, at least read the translation so you are able to understand. Because like, Arabic is not our language. And but we were told on the other side that if you want to, like, gain the benefits of afterlife and all this, so you have to read Quran in Arabic, otherwise, so this was like, as I'm saying, it was a lot of conflicting things. For example, in our society, we were taught that boys and girls are not equal. They can't do the same things, because girls have to be in home, they are only for domestic work, and they don't have that right to play, go outside, do all these things. On the other hand, our father was a completely different human being. He was practicing gender equality in our home. So he was not only like talking, he was implementing all those things. So for example, if my mother was not at home, he would ask my brother to wash to clean the bathroom, the washroom. He would ask my brother to cook for us. And it was like, he never, because usually in families in our society, what happens is that like, sons are, they are very violent, and if they show their violence, it means that they are very masculine, and they are like, they're showing their strength. It was never ever appreciated or not allowed at my home. It was strictly restricted. And since our childhood, it was taught to us that they, like, our brothers don't have to interfere in our lives, and we, like, they don't have this right. And it was practiced, on like daily basis. So the society was telling to be the ultimate goal of our lives, only to be the obedient wives and daughters. On the other hand, our father was like, you have to be independent. There is, like, you don't have to think what other people think about life. You have to be first independent. You have to study. You have to do something in your life. Then go whatever. It will be your choice. So it was like growing up in a family which is not common. Of course, yeah, it was and I'm so privileged that I grew up in that family, because I have been I had a chance to actually stay with some other families in Pakistan as well very recently. And I can tell you that, it's I think I had that, like, close chance to live with those families. And the way the masculinity is so much engraved in there, women do not have any freedom even to, like, like they, even women and girls are not allowed to wear what they want to. They're not allowed even to think what they want to think. There is so much suffocation that there. I must say that I'm so privileged to have this family who really played an important role in giving me this understanding, in telling me that what's logic. I think that's the gift from my family, especially from my father and from both of my parents. Yeah.
Paint the picture a little more for us about your family. You mentioned you have some brothers. You obviously have a sister. How many brothers and sisters do you have in total? And where in Pakistan did you grow up?
So we are a big family. We are six siblings, and four sisters and two brothers. I grew up all of my life in in Peshawar, and my family recently moved to Islamabad. Peshawar is actually in the northwest of Pakistan, so I have lived all of my life very close to the tribal areas of Pakistan and close to the borders of Afghanistan. But as the work that we are doing, and as I said, it's like it's very different work, and the issues that we are working on, so it has become our lives are at risk when we work in Pakistan on these issues. So that's why my family had to move to other locations in Islamabad very recently.
Mm-hmm. So your lives were at risk. I mean, you've been saying that a lot of what your dad was talking about, the work that you and your sister were doing, was really running counter to what was expected, particularly of young women and girls. So that put your life at risk.
Yes, yes, we had to relocate our office many times. We had to be like, my family had to be in hidings at certain points because we had no option. We were like living we had no internet, we had no communication with the outer world. So we had to because we had to to secure our lives, and for that we had to do, like, it comes at the cost of it extended to our family. We did it, like, I and my sister are doing this work, so we are at the forefront. But like we knew that we are also, like, our family is also becoming at risk, because, like, when two people work in the same, in the same setup. But also in Pakistan, the life of other human rights defenders and their families are also at risk. The life of journalists are at risk, who want to speak up against especially against the militancy and terrorism. So yeah, we had to, like, we have become refugees even in our own country, and it's really, of course, it's like, it's really a traumatic experience, going through all that, just because you believe in, that, there shouldn't be no more militancy and Talibanization in Pakistan, and then you have to experience all this. But I think whenever these things happened, it gave us more commitment and, strengthened us, because we were like, okay, now it means that we have a really huge impact. We are able to trying to reach out to the people. We are preventing them from getting recruited by the militant groups. And that's we thought that, yes, it means that we are doing some work which has a huge impact, and that's why we have become a threat to these state and non-state agencies, and that's why they are threatening us.
You're listening to The Peace Frequency, a podcast series searching for ways to create a world free of violent conflict and finding those in the stories of people across the globe that are making peace possible. My guest on today's podcast is Saba Ismail. She is the co-founder and executive director of the organization Aware Girls, which is a women-led organization working for women empowerment, gender equality, and peace in Pakistan. Saba, you mentioned you've been talking about how you and your family were threatened. Was there a specific moment, or when was the first moment where a threat was received and you and your family made the decision, we have to leave where we're living or where we're working and go somewhere else? When was the first time that decision had to be made, and what was the threat?
So the first time when we were displaced in our country was when I was 7 years old. It was back in 1990s, when, because my father is a very outspoken person, so he was thrown out of his village just because he's a liberal person. So that I was 7 years old. We moved from village. I actually, for the first 7 years of my life, I lived in a village called Margus. It's in district Sawabi. So I lived there, and then we moved to Peshawar at that time. So in Peshawar, while we were working, I grew up, my studies, everything. But one of the worst incident happened on the mid-May of 14th and 15th May of 2014, when a group of armed men actually attacked our family. It was almost midnight. My sister was just coming from a conference that she was attending in Brussels. So these were actually men who were posing themselves as security guards. So they came and they were like, we are here to search your home and you have to open the door. So luckily, like my father like would open the door, but luckily my mother just locked the door from inside. When we actually, it's different. It doesn't, it's because whenever in our home since our childhood, like, whenever we sleep, we lock our doors from inside as a security measures, because overall the situation in Pakistan is not very safe. So and that night she actually locked the door from inside, so he couldn't open the door. And then those men, they started banging on the door. They were like, they were calling my sister name, that we are here for her, we have to so yeah. So this was actually then they also like they did aerial firing, so firing in the air, and they threatened us that they will come back. They will come back. And so that was actually the moment. I was extremely, of course, I was like really emotionally disturbed by what happened, because I was like, I have my family, and what if something happens to them, how I'm going to survive. And then when my father was just about to pick her up from the airport, and my youngest sister and my mother, we were only three people then at home. And we were like, we had no security at all. And we were like, we don't know what to do. But then my father went to pick her up from the airport, and my father didn't spoke anything to her at all when they were coming back to home. But she could, like, she could tell from that, something is wrong. So as soon as she entered, she was like, my, like, the skin color of father is like, it has turned black. And it's similar with the I can see the faces of, like, our parents. There's something is wrong. And then I told her what actually happened, what was the incident. And then it was actually the time that we decided that we should move, because we are not safe anymore in Peshawar. So we just decided on that moment. And we were like, we can't spend even one more night in that house, because it has those people were like, they hide their car under a tree. And it was really a traumatic experience for us.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this is the bravery. This is the determination that exhibited in the times that I've heard you speak, and in your story, and the determination that you could probably attest this. A lot of other peace builders face, particularly working in these contexts. It really is unbelievable, and I'm in awe that you and your sister and your family continue to do this work in the face of all this. Not a lot of people, I think, or not enough people are able to muster up that courage. The mission statement of Aware Girls clearly states that this is a young women-led organization. And so I've always had this question when talking about youth, and you use the term young women, young people. So what do you mean by that? I know the UN Security Council defines young person as people between the ages of 18 and 29, I believe. Do you and your organization define youth the same way? And well, let's start with that. Do you find youth the same way?
So in our organization, yes, we do. We are working with people, with children as well, so under 18 as well. But our like age range is, we are working with people under 30 years of age. We do have we do have our staff, our board, all of them are under 30 years of age. But we are not excluding the people who are above this age. So we do have an advisory group in our girls, in which the women who are like above 30 but who wants to join, who wants to like give us advice, who we still want women to learn from them, from their experiences. So we do have that advisory board. And we are also engaging like older women in some of our programs. Like one of our program is about actually about labor rights among women who are working as domestic workers and as home-based workers. So those, we are like engaging also women above 30 years old in some of our programs as mentors, as well. Yeah, so it's like not, we are not excluding any age group.
Okay. Yeah, it's young women led. And so I'm assuming that the leadership positions within the organization will remain led by young women. I'm asking this question because I don't fall in that category anymore. I'm just outside of it, but I guess I can't necessarily call myself a young person anymore. But I've worked for organizations that work primarily with young people, and so there was a moment in time where I could identify with the groups that I was working with, and that was nice. But at a certain point in those leadership roles, you've got to move on. So I'm wondering if you and your sister, when that time comes, are you ready? Are you able? What's the plan to continue to fulfill that mission as being an organization that's led by young women?
So what we are actually thinking that we transform the leadership to younger generation, and so we are in that process. We are actually already building the capacity of other women as leaders so that they can take up the leadership positions, because the vision of the organization is basically it's a young women-led organization. So we would really love to to continue with the same mission and vision, but yeah, I'm not very sure at this moment that when I turn 30, although I'm going to turn 30 very soon, only in like 2 years time. But I haven't think, because I don't think so well that I'm going to leave Aware Girls at any point, because this is this was a thing that I co-founded, and this was something that that is really my passion and my work. Now we are actually in the process of establishing our office in New York, so giving us more like networking opportunities, and linking up our work in Pakistan and here. So well,
We'll have to see. We'll have to wait and see.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. So you mentioned at the event that we had here at USIP that you were talking about earlier this week that Aware Girls conducted a survey that established some baseline data on the opinions and perspectives of young people that are living in the communities where you work. And I thought that was very revealing, because it really showed the audience and showed myself the context in which you're working, and the challenges that you're facing in terms of the mindsets of young people. Could you share some of that data with our listeners?
Sure. So this was actually a research that we did in the community level, and we wanted to know about the trends of extremism and trends of violence and intolerance in our community. So, well, what we developed a questionnaire for that, and we then gathered this information through interviews, and then we compiled this data. I'm going to share a very few statistics at this moment, but so this is when we did this research. 45% of the respondents supported the Taliban ideology. So they were like that, we support this ideology, and it's a huge number of people. It's almost 50%.
And sorry, in which community is this again?
So it was in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa region, so it's in the northwest of Pakistan.
Okay.
Yeah. And 82% of the people said that if they ever get a chance to be a martyr for Islam in their life, so they will go for it. Every second person was of the opinion that it is okay to use violence as a tool, as a religious and a political tool, and this to promote these ideologies and ideas, and to work they can use violence, and it is okay. And 52% of the people said that, they do not believe that people from other religions should have the right and freedom to have their own worship places. So they were like, that only Muslims have the right to have their worship places, but people who are from other religions, they don't have. So this is actually, this is the context in which we are working, and that's the reason that we established the Youth Peace Network, which is a network of young people, and we are using a leadership and a peer-to-peer education model in which young people reach out to other young people who are very much vulnerable to be recruited, and we are giving them alternative narratives that are based on nonviolence, intolerance, and compassion, pluralism. So we are trying to prevent them from getting recruited in that. So because in this network, we are trying to create an environment where there is no space for violence, and which is more where there is love, where there is respect for each other. So in our program, we do have like a pre and a post survey for our feedback and to know that our programs are effective or not. And 90% of people after the training, then they agreed that yes, people from other religions should have the basic right to have their worship places. Yeah, so this is actually this was this is the scenario where we are working.
One of the courses that we offer here at USIP is a course on conflict analysis. And one reason I found you sharing this research and this data interesting was because there's an interesting story behind that in terms of how you developed that methodology, how you and others went out there into the community and approached people and interviewed them. Could you tell us a little bit about how that process worked to actually get at that data? We talk a lot about conflict analysis, we talk a lot about data, but then what was the process that folks had to go through to actually get that information?
So what we did in this study was we first developed a questionnaire, and it was so these when we developed this questionnaire, we did this survey through the help of like our focal persons and the members of the Youth Peace Network in different communities. We did it in the tribal areas, in the Malakan division, in Sawabi, Peshawar, so all these areas of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province of Pakistan.
And how did you identify the folks that were part of that network?
They were actually already part of the Youth Peace Network, so they already get training from the from Aware Girls, and they already knew about what we are working, what this network is, and they have already like get the training and skills on peace building and conflict resolution. So then these people, both young men and young women, they went into their communities. So they did gather information from local people, from shopkeepers. They went and gathered this in the universities, in colleges, in hostels. So it was like from household people who are just like in houses and they doing household jobs. So there were like a huge variety of people who responded to this survey, who responded to these questions, and then our team back at Aware Girls, then we all like pull up this information, we transferred it to our computers, and then we did all these statistics and these calculations. I will like to mention one thing, that while we were actually getting this information, about the trends of religious extremism and militancy. So once we were, because Aware Girls want to be like to be the members to be secure as well, the people who are associated and affiliated with our network. So we were in a process of developing a security policy for our organization. So we contacted some of the agencies, some of the secret agencies of Pakistan, and we asked them that what is that, what is that that we are at risk, why Aware Girls is at risk when we are working for peace, like we are working for positive things. So what's that? So then also they told us that even if you want to get some information about the issue of religious extremism and militancy, it actually raises the red flags against you as an individual and as an organization automatically, because it's a very sensitive information. That if you ask from people that is it okay if someone is of other religion, if they should have the right to to worship, or do you think that the militants are good people or bad people? So even if you ask these type of questions, this becomes a risk for I don't know for whom, but it becomes risky for Aware Girls and the members associated with it. So this process in itself, getting this data, it was a difficult process for us, and so that's.
Yeah, I was going to ask that about the security issues. Like you said, just asking the question is considered challenging, or a challenge, or is considered threatening, not just to the person who's asking the question, of course. They look at you and say, why do you even ask that question? Why are you even attempting to challenge this by asking the question? But then also how people respond. Are they responding truthfully, what they actually believe, or are they responding with what they think they're supposed to say? Both, I think, are revealing. You're listening to The Peace Frequency. This is a podcast series searching for ways to create a world free of violent conflict and finding them in the stories of people across the globe that are making peace possible. I'm your host, Darren Cambridge, and my guest with me in the studio is Saba Ismail. She is the co-founder and executive director of Aware Girls. That's a young women-led organization working for women empowerment, gender equality, and peace in Pakistan and around the world. You mentioned that one of the questions you asked and the data that it revealed was that a large number of people found they found the Taliban ideology appealing. And without going into too much detail, what does that entail, the Taliban ideology, and why do you think that appeal exists in this community in particular?
Okay, so there are a lot of factors associated with it. Our education system, as I mentioned very early, that how our education system is teaching hatred, and our education system is teaching violence and the use of violence as an okay thing. So of course they are the Taliban and the militant groups. They are using education to recruit people. Another factor is our media in Pakistan, which is promoting, which is glorifying violence, which is glorifying the militant groups, which is glorifying the people who are associated with the militant groups. And I think that really plays an important role, because media shapes the minds of people. There are they can reach to thousands and millions of people through the media. And if there are people who are supporting this ideology, so of course this has a lot of influence on people who are watching, who are listening, or who are reading that media. Another very important factor is the political parties of Pakistan. They are also very some of them are supportive to the Taliban ideology. Some has actually asked the Taliban to open their office. Some has there is a lot of support towards the Taliban ideology. There are other religious political parties who are also propagating the same thing into the minds of the people. So and our culture as well. I would say that yes, our culture is a very main component. That why it is in our culture, it is it's a matter of pride to hang guns in the drawing room. It's a matter of that you are a very elite person, and it's a matter of very pride. So just waving guns outside in the public, it's a matter of power. It shows that you are very powerful person. So yeah, these are actually a lot of factors are contributing to this ideology. And as I was again linking to the education system, that teachers who are the product of this system, of course they cannot they are also teaching a lot of violence and hatred to the young people. And I think that's all of these factors then contribute to an ideology that is this Taliban and the militant ideology. I think, yeah, these are the different factors. This is not one single factor that they are using. Yeah, another thing is that the Taliban and the similar other militant groups, they know that, for example, that people have limited source of information regarding the religion, and they are taking benefit from it. So they are telling people that what's written in Quran, they interpret it, they explain it to them, and they use it for their own purposes. And I think it's on the responsibility of the people as well, that if they are educated, if they have this opportunity, so they read and they take their own messages instead of just taking information from one side. When actually the Taliban group were taking control of Swat Valley, they were very strategic. They are also very strategic when they select a place where they are going to rule. So for example, the Swat Valley is a valley with mountains and forest as well. So it's easy for them to have an area, not a plain area, but it's more easy for them. Similarly, with the tribal areas of Pakistan, there are also mountainous regions. So they also select the area very carefully, strategically. Second point is that what they do is that when they want to infiltrate into a community, they restrict their communication and information from the outer world. What happened in Sawat and in the Malakand division was that they asked people that that television it's haram, and they should not listen to it.
Haram.
Haram means it's something it's forbidden in
Okay.
religion. So what they did was that then what strategy they use is they were like, okay, someone volunteered a television. They came on the street and they burnt the television. So it was a volunteer, and then the people in the community, they will bring up, like, they started bringing their televisions as well, and they burnt. They started attacking the CD shops. So the CDs, for it can be for games, it can be for entertainment, for education, it can be used for anything. But they were like, CDs are also like, they are Western and they are haram, and so they shouldn't be allowed. So they targeted the CD shops. They asked people to burn their television, so that they do not have access to the outer world, and they only listen to one information that is being given by the Taliban. What happened was that then they very wisely used the use of media. They
Hmm.
established their own radio program, and they started preaching their teachings on radio in Malakan division. And you know what section of the society was supporting Taliban?
Hmm.
Which section could it be? Which section of the society? Any guess?
Young people?
No,
No,
not at
older,
all.
not
These were
young.
women. Women were supporting this Taliban ideology because the reason, and even like women were giving them their gold jewelry, women were giving them money for the Taliban, because the thing was that they also used very strategically. They did it very strategically. The program that they started, the radio program, they were actually talking to women. They were responding to their questions. They were taking the questions, and they were like, they were very interacting to the women. And
Hmm.
women are section of a society which is not, people talk about women, but they don't talk to women. They don't take in there.
Fascinating.
So they use this strategy, and of course then women were like, they were never being involved so much in any other thing, and they were so much involved, and that's why they became the greatest supporters of the Taliban. And they later like restricted women's education and girls' education. They destroyed the girls' education, and the reason is that, yeah, of course, they know that what power is in the hands of an empowered and educated women.
Hmm.
They really know, of course. That's why they are so much fearful, and that's why they were targeting. In our province, the literacy rate fell by 2% because of the religious extremism and militancy.
Hmm.
And there were even places where not even a single girl could go to school, because they were not allowed even to get out of their homes. So what I'm saying, that this ideology, it's all about establishing their own Islamic state. They want to demolish democracy. They want to have power. They want to be the most powerful, and they want to rule. It's simple. That's their only objective, and that's why they are using people in different ways, in different strategies. They do have, like, I was just having now like a discussion at lunch with, actually, with someone, and we were discussing the same thing, that these Taliban or the militant groups, when they want to have an attack, they will never think of fundraising, that from where the money will come from. They have such tactics. They already have money. They never short run of resources. They always have so much human resources that they can use. They also know what to do, what's their targeted, and they're so much clear in what they want to do. So they are, I think they are the wise people, because they have all these things, and they are promoting their ideology through different ways.
Hmm. There's so much to explore here. And I also remind anyone who's listening, they can post their questions on the broadcast page in the discussion forum. They can post their questions on Facebook or share them on Twitter using the hashtag Peace Frequency. We'd love to bring those into the show. My first question on this is around negotiation. And over these last many years, over a decade now, violent conflict in Afghanistan and obviously Pakistan as well. And there have been conversations about, well, should the Taliban be brought into negotiations, power sharing, these types of things. We offer a course on negotiation here. We talk a lot about the dynamics at play. This sounds like a very complicated, difficult situation when a country is trying to reduce the levels of violence, bring some type of political stability, and they're looking at a major player in the conflict, in this case, the Taliban, and saying, maybe we do need to sit down at the table with this group, even though they have this ideology, but work out some negotiation with them. What are your thoughts on how a country, and you can respond or not respond. I know that as a leader of a civil society organization, that question might put you in a difficult situation, but you maybe talk more broadly about those dynamics in a negotiation where you've got one side that is fundamentally in disagreement with another side, but if there's no negotiation, that violent stalemate essentially just persists. How do you deal with that?
Well, yeah, it is, of course, like a question. It's a good question, actually. I must say, I personally, I think that, when you negotiate with someone, it means that you are, like, I don't know, but I think that there should be systems in which there is, like, the justice system should be strengthened, and there should be no space for such extreme ideologies in some such extreme organizations or individuals. So I personally don't I'm I don't think so that, we should give space, or we should give, like, freedom to the militant groups and to the extremist groups. um that's my stance on it. And but I think that, like, recently, actually, government of Pakistan and Taliban were having negotiations. They were, like, they wanted to have these peace negotiations, but there was, my concern, like, there was no women in these negotiations committees, or no young people. So on one side, I believe that, we should there should space shouldn't be given to the extremist groups. But if negotiations are happening, then, young people and young women at least should be included in these negotiations. Because the reason why I'm saying is that, because young people and young women are the ones who are most affected by religious extremism and militancy. And when it comes to participatory peace processes, they are the one who are the most excluded from these processes. I did a research on the psychological impact of terrorism on young women a few years ago, and it was so alarming that how women have been, so much affected by the extremism, but they are not included in these peace processes. So uh, yeah, I think that if there has to be negotiations, if there has to be sit on the table with these people, I don't know, but how will the process be? Because maybe the militant groups don't, they don't, they have a very different, they have very different values than us in the peace building community. If yeah.
Mm-hmm. I also want to touch on something you mentioned on the panel the other day here, and it's a point that I think deserves to be repeated over and over again. You said that there's research showing that gender equal societies are less susceptible to violent extremism. Another way that I've heard that research quoted by Gloria Steinem is that the most violent communities or parts of the world are parts of the world that have the largest levels of gender inequality. And it's, a lot of people say, oh, well, it's poverty, or it's literacy rates, or it's type of government. But this research that's come out shows that actually, no, you want to be able to identify where violent conflict is going to erupt or persist. Look at the parts of the world where there's gross levels of gender inequality. I'm not familiar with the research. I haven't read it in depth. But given the research that you've done, as you just mentioned, why do you think that is? Why do you think there's such a connection between gender inequality and violent extremism?
So yeah, so as you were saying about the poverty and literacy, and so I think that it's very easy to blame these two people. I don't know what the word I use for these two, the poverty and literacy. Whenever there is any problem in Pakistan, people say, oh, it's because of poverty and lack of education, and it's because of this. But it's more about, of course, about ideology. And then coming to the point of the gender equality, of course, I think that, yeah, if there is gender equality in any place, if women are empowered, if they can do, because they do have the potential to do a lot of work. They do have a potential to prevent people from being in this violence. And also, for example, I'll just in case of mothers, they know their children, and if they are empowered, they will know that what's happening, and they can prevent their kids into going into violence. They can work with them. And also, I think whenever there is more when there is women, women are empowered, so those communities, they're also economically more progressive, and I think that also can lead to more more sustainable societies, and where it's more less problems.
You're listening to The Peace Frequency, a podcast series searching for ways to create a world free of violent conflict and finding those in the stories of people across the globe that are making peace possible. I'm your host, Darren Cambridge, and my guest on today's show is Saba Ismail. She's the co-founder and executive director of Aware Girls, a young women-led organization working for women empowerment, gender equality, and peace in Pakistan. Saba, I want to talk a little bit about the narrative work that you do. And you were talking earlier about the appeal of the Taliban ideology, some of the strategies that they use, what communities they enter, how they associate with individuals, how they relate to women. And I started thinking about other extremist groups, other extremist ideologies. Of course, what came to the top was ISIS, ISIL, whatever they're being called. And it is somewhat fascinating to study the strategy of how people are recruited to go and join that fight or that community or that world. What I find fascinating about it is that a lot of these individuals are making a fundamental transformation in how they live their life. I mean, they're uprooting themselves, they're leaving their family, they're abandoning their whole life, their school, job, whatever, and going to another part of the world in many cases, and becoming part of a culture that is very different and very extreme. And so something in my head is like, how does that work? What are they doing? What narrative are they putting out there? And how are they putting out there that gets people to make that much of a change in their life? And I keep asking myself, how can the peace and nonviolent movement create narratives that are equally as powerful? How can they share and disseminate those narratives in ways that are as appealing and as widespread, that create that fundamental shift in how people behave, what they think, how they act, but for peace and nonviolence? And what I hear in your work is that Aware Girls is at the forefront of figuring that puzzle out. So my question is, are there strategies that the Taliban or other extremist groups use that the peace and nonviolence movement could actually learn from and say, oh, interesting that they speak with this group in that way, or they work in this community for these various reasons? Let's start with that. Are there anything that the peace and nonviolence from these extremist movements in terms of reaching, recruiting people?
Okay, so well, lessons from the extremist. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, one thing I would like to now explain a little bit, that they are glorifying the life after death. They are actually, they are giving people the glorification of heaven. That when you go to heaven, you will get this, everything. You will have a life that, all these very, very good things. They're offering a lot, they're offering heaven. Come on, they're it's really important for us to understand, with the peace building community, that what we are offering to people. Do we have the ability to offer? And I think it's really important that we make peace a matter of energy, a matter of creativity. We should make peace as an adventure, and not set boring, maybe a subject only to study at university, or the people who are not common people work on peace building. No, it shouldn't be like that, because if we have to, if I think it's really important that we also learn, of course, from other things that they are doing. For example, the use of social media that they are doing. We should use social media. Just look at the hashtags and the tweets that they are using. It's like, because sometimes people, now they, because now ISIS, organization like ISIS or ISIL, are using the social media. But the previous group like Taliban and Al Qaeda were not that using Twitter, and they were not using social media, and they were using other strategies to recruit people. So they have developed, the militant groups have developed strategies with the passage of time. Because sometimes people, when the Taliban and Al Qaeda emerged, people thought that these are people who are living in mountains and they do not have access to technology. Well, come on, it's not. They do have, that's what they do have access to all those things. But I think they were, they didn't use the social media. But it's not that they have engineers, they have doctors in their teams, of course, like so many professional people. But now, yes, the ISIS has, like, turned everything down. They're like using every possible way to use it. So yeah, I think we have to learn from them how they are engaging, how they are attracting so many millions and millions of people. I was actually just hearing to the Youth NY, to the UN Youth NY, Ahmed Al Hindawi, a few days ago, and he said that, what was the organization that organized the largest gathering of young people in the world in 2015? It was ISIS.
Wow.
They gathered 30,000 young people from around 100 countries. And I was like, wow, look at this. That was, I was mentioning earlier, that they never think of fundraising, of human resources, and all these things that the peace building community is struggling. So I think it's the responsibility of the international community and the donor community as well, that we, the young peace builder, always have to struggle for funding, always have to struggle for more resources. We, of course, we are doing small things in, at a smaller scale, a smaller level. But look at the other way around. The extremist groups are, like, gathering. They have this potential to gather like 30,000. It's not a number. It's like, real people gathering them. So it's a huge thing. And I think, yeah, it's really, we have to think what we are offering to young people.
Mm.
Because I think that the peace building community, at the currently, and there should be more engagement of young people and young women in peace building processes. It's really important. We have to be creative, we have to be innovative, and yeah.
Mm. Mm. You mentioned that there are some counter narratives that you put forward. I mean, you mentioned what they're offering is heaven. So how do you counter that? And maybe ways they're offering bravery and adventure. And I love what you said earlier, that peace should be an adventure. It should be a creative process. It shouldn't be some static, boring subject matter or theory that you study in a classroom, but it should be seen as an adventure. I think ISIS clearly portrays and captures what they're attempting to do as the ultimate adventure. Ergo, why they can gather 30,000 people in a war zone. I mean, it's not like they're going to some beach or whatever. It's like not necessarily the best place on earth, yet they still bring these folks together for this adventure. How does peace become that adventure for young people in particular?
So the work that I'm doing, I would like to share that what we are doing, that we have established this youth peace network. And what we do is we identify young people as partners in peace building processes. So that's, I think it's important. We are like, not that you are the beneficiaries of this program, but you're of this, this thing. So we are engaging them as partners. We develop their capacities, and then these young people go into their communities. They reach out through a disintegration strategy, like peer-to-peer education model, in which they prevent their peers. I think because whenever peers approach peers, it's easy for them to listen, to understand, and to link each other. And then we give them different the alternative narratives, that are based on non-violence and tolerance. And for example, giving them examples of the non-violent indigenous movements that's already in our part of the world. There was indigenous movement called Khudai Khidmatgar movement by Bacha Khan. So we are like teaching people that it's not something from the outer world. It was our, it's our indigenous movement. We do have those movements in our history, and we should learn from that. We also, like, so it's basically engaging young people in these type of conversations in which there is acceptance, where they listen to each other, where there are dialogues. And we also do, like, we have done peace vigils. So in the memory of people who have lost their lives, we have done poetry programs. So for example, one of the alternatives that you were saying, that what actually the poetry is a way that a lot of things can be expressed in poetry. But the Taliban and these groups, they always they restrict even programs on that's poetry programs even. So what we do is we organize those programs. We give people a platform and an opportunity where they can come, where they can listen to this amazing poetry, to music. We like one of the program that we did was on 14th February, because we think that peace is about love. We have to, like, we have to promote love in our country. And that's why, like, taking, I think, taking opportunity from these smaller, like smaller things, and engaging people in a way that's that's more engaging. So we like do screening of movies. We do like a lot of group work with those young people. So and then these young people also work into their communities. We are reconstructing the bonds in communities. We are organizing interfaith dialogues. So when we were doing these interfaith dialogues in the Malakan division, it was for the first time, like, young people who are participating in our program, they were like, that it's the first time that they're attending a program in which people from all these religions have sit and come together. Even one of the participants, what he told me after this program was, he said that when I was coming to attend this interfaith dialogue, I thought that when I will enter, I will be able to identify people from their faces on the basis of the religion. And he was like, I came and everybody is talking about peace. Everybody is talking about mankind. Everybody's taking, like, all the people from, even from different, like, the other religions are also talking about that, how we can make Pakistan a peaceful country. And he was like, it's unbelievable for me, because now I'm confused that, which religion should I choose, because everyone is, teaching about happiness, about love and mankind. So I think, yeah, I think these type of alternatives are very necessary that we put forward into our communities. We expose people to, like, to all these all these different things that they are not used to on their daily basis. And I think that's how we can bring a change in the community.
You're listening to The Peace Frequency, a podcast series searching for ways to create a world free of violent conflict and finding those in the stories of people across the globe that are making peace possible. I'm your host, Darren Cambridge, and my guest on today's show is Saba Ismail. She is the co-founder and executive director of Aware Girls, a young women-led organization working for women empowerment, gender equality, and peace in Pakistan. Saba, I'd love to hear more about the peer-to-peer education model and the gender considerations that go into that model. Can you walk us through a day or a week in the life of someone who is one of those peers that goes and reaches out to his or her peers, and what are some of the gender dimensions of how that works?
Okay, so in our program, we have gender equal groups. So the groups of Youth Peace Network, every group is like, it's half and half, young men and young women. The peer-to-peer education model, I'll just describe a story, and I think it will help you to go through that process. There was a guy, and he was actually living in the tribal areas of Pakistan, and he was not happy with what Taliban were doing in his area. So, and Taliban actually imposed a dress code in a dress and a way of life, in that community. He didn't want it to be dressed just like they wanted. So, but he couldn't go out of the home because of that, because then his life was at risk if you go out. So he would stay inside his home and he wouldn't go outside. Once what happened that the Taliban raided his home, and they arrested him. He was put in Taliban prison because he was not following their dress code. When he was in prison, he experienced a very traumatic experience there. He saw that how they are humiliating other people as well, and his family had to pay a huge amount of money to release him from his prison. So, well, eventually he was released, and he decided that he's not going to live anymore in his village because he just wanted to leave that area. He left his village, and he came to another city, to Peshawar. And there, luckily, he had a chance to meet with other members of the Youth Peace Network. And he saw that these members of the Youth Peace Network are reclaiming spaces from the militant groups. They are not, the victims, and just, okay, this thing happened to us, so now we are going to, not do anything. But they're doing so many great things, so I should join this network. And this guy, he joined the Youth Peace Network. He became part of it, and he decided that he will go back to his village, and he will bring a change. So he went to his village, and what he did was he mobilized the elders of his community and all other people, and he organized a sports festival. So he called it that he organized this for peace. And he it was a time when people would not gather because of the fear of Taliban. Even in that very difficult circumstances, he managed to gather all these people. He organized this festival, and he used this as an opportunity to raise funds so that he can provide funding to children, so that they can go to common schools and not to the religious, like to the madrasas, because madrasas are the first point of like recruitment by the militant groups. So he's now supporting more than 350 children. He's supporting their education. He also working, like, in his community, and he's like, I have to do something for them. And he is now also developing, like, modules. He's working with schools so that they can teach more peace and nonviolence. Yeah, so this is actually just, a short story of one of our member. I think that will give you an idea and or an overview of how they can join, what they do after this. So our members of the Youth Peace Network, they develop action plans, social action plans at the end of the training program. And then they actually do, like, they do work on the ground. So it's not only like, a training. And we actually engage one group of young people for continuously for 1 year. Sometimes it's even for 2 or 3 years. It's like, it depends. But the normal, like, the common length of period is 1 year. So it's like, it's a very in-depth process. It's a very engaging process. It's like a one-to-one. They also engage other peers in one-to-one conversations in closed circles. It may be like a group of 3 or 4 people, not more than that. And it's like they meet on regular basis. They do have these discussions and dialogues. And Aware Girls is always there to mentor them, to give them mentorship, and to help them in all these ways.
That's wonderful. I've got two more questions, and then we'll wrap this up. There's one of my favorite movies here, made in the United States, is called Remember the Titans. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's about a football team actually here locally many years ago, and they were one of the first teams in Virginia to integrate Black and white students. And there's a scene where there's been conflict on the team, and they're not getting along. And one of the Black students goes to one of the white students, and the white student says, what's your problem? You have such a bad attitude. And the Black student says, well, attitude reflects leadership. And as a leader of this organization, and hearing the stories about not just this individual, the story that you just told, but also the other folks in the Peace Network who are going out and conducting the surveys, doing this work, organizing these events, meeting with each other, facilitating these dialogues, having these one-on-one meetings, putting themselves at risk for this adventure we call peace. It reflects the leadership of the organization, you and your sister. And so how do you take time to sit back and reflect on your leadership style? Has it evolved over the years as you've been running this organization so that you can inspire those who join the network, those who join the organization? What do you think, what is your leadership style, and how has it changed, if at all, since you've started this organization?
Yeah, of course, it has changed over the period of time because when I and Gulali started, we were like very young and we didn't have any experience at all. So we, of course, and now after so many years, we do have like a lot of experience working with so many people in so many different settings. So yeah, I believe that the leadership is very important. That the way we lead the group and the way we lead our team, I think it's really important that we take our team together in this work, because our team is our strength. And I think that we have a very I am leadership is important, but if we don't have like a good team, then I don't think so that the leaders even can do anything. So I believe that the work that we are together, like working as a team and as a family, because we call our girls as a family, and how we are working is, I think it's really important, because our team is our strength. And yeah, personally, I actually am very much inspired from my sister. She's the like she's my leader, and I always I learn from her every time I am, and I'm just so much inspired from her. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. And here's the last question. In the spirit of UN resolution, Security Council resolution 2250 and 1325, you started this organization as a young woman for young women to build peace. What is a message that you'd like to share with other young women peace builders, those young women and girls who want to get into to do this work? What message do you have for them, for someone who's living this amazing journey?
So, message for young women or for young women peace builders?
For young women would-be peace builders, young women who
Yeah.
want to do this kind of work. They're trying to figure out how to enter into it, how to do it, how to find the motivation to do it. That's the audience.
So my answer will be, one thing is believe in yourself. It's really important that if someone believes in your power, women do have that. Women do have that power to bring a change, in not only in her life but also in lives that are associated with her. So believe in your power, and I think nothing is impossible in this world. And we can even like shake the mountains if we want. If so, we do have the power. And yeah, I think it's that and I would encourage everyone to be a peace builder, because one message is that I think that peace is not that someone has to be a peace builder to work for peace, but anybody, because it's a matter of daily life. It's something that should be on every step in our life we take. It's related to peace. I was recently actually in a conference, and I had a chance to meet with people, to listen to people from NASA who have been to space 4 times, and they're working on peace. There are neuroscientists who are working on peace. There are a huge range. And that was my learning even from that conference. It was actually in DC just a few weeks ago. And I was like, it's really, you don't have to be a peace builder to work in for peace. It's just something that you can be in any field. You can be in, if you're a student, you can do it. If you're like if you're a domestic, if you're doing domestic jobs, still you can do it. If you are like a scientist, if you're a teacher, it's there is like no constraint, that there's nothing that can prevent you from bringing peace on this world.
That's great. That's great. You've been listening to The Peace Frequency, a podcast series searching for ways to create a world free of violent conflict and finding those in the stories of people across the globe that are making peace possible. My guest on today's show has been Saba Ismail. She's the co-founder and executive director of Aware Girls, a young women-led organization working for women empowerment, gender equality, and peace in Pakistan. You can learn more about Saba and her work at awaregirls.org. You can follow her on Twitter at Saba Ismail or at Aware Girl. Saba, it has been an absolute honor to sit down and hear your story and hear your journey today. So thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much, Darren.
The Peace Frequency is produced by the Global Campus, USIP's online learning platform designed to strengthen your peace-building skills through distance learning courses, a growing multimedia library of peace-building resources, and virtual live events. You can learn more about the Global Campus at usipglobalcampus.org. Our sound engineer and theme music composer is Timothy O'Keefe. Our graphic designer is Manuel Leon. And I've been your host, Darren Cambridge. Thanks to our listeners for tuning in. Be sure to check the Peace Frequency website to access a recording of this show and other archived episodes of the podcast. The URL is usipglobalcampus.org/peace-frequency. Until then, keep learning, supporting, and building peace.